Hi everyone, my name is Viksveen. I'm from Norway. I was so very fortunate to be the PhD student of Claire Elton and John Nicol, and I also had the luxury of doing full-scale RCT using the CMRCT design in depression, but that's not what I'm going to talk about now. I'm just going to very briefly present to you the project plan for my next project. Is this? So, very recently I've started a postdoctoral position at the University of Stavanger in the southwestern part of Norway, and the plan here is to set up a mental health cohort for adolescents. And mental health problems are common in adolescents in Norway, as I think there are in many countries, and also they have a legal right to be involved in their own care. But there's very little research looking into adolescents' user involvement in mental health care. So we are hoping to set up a cohort, and our aims are to assess user involvement at individual and system levels, so for their own care and also to improve healthcare systems, interventions, services, in primary and secondary care, and to look into satisfaction, effectiveness, cost effectiveness, and safety of healthcare services. And I also want to add to that, possibly look at the effectiveness and safety of user involvement on mental health outcomes. This is quite preliminary, but we're hoping to set up a population cohort. So that's all the kids, teenagers, age 13 to 17, 18, something like that, in the county where we live. And there's also previously been done some surveys in that region, and with a very high participation rate, over 90%, hoping to recruit them through schools. So for the ethical concerns, I think there are three key issues that I just want to mention, and I have more questions than answers to this, and even more after leaving this symposium. Two of them are TWIC specific, and one of them, the first one has to do with the consent process. So what are we asking consent for? And after having heard all discussions, I'm keen on trying to simplify the process and ask for consent once, and maybe an opt-out solution for participating in trials, or being selected to receive an offer of an intervention. But yeah, that's my opinion at this point in time. And then the second issue, I think, was John Nicol who mentioned yesterday that the use of social media. We know adolescents use them to a very, very high extent. So we're wondering, I'm asking myself the question, what will happen to the research once they start telling each other that they've been invited for this and that intervention, and how are we dealing with this, and what are the ethical implications of that? And then finally, there's a generic ethics question about informed consent. Age 15 and below, we have to ask the parents for consent, but I'm wondering, is there some way we can also open up for some of these adolescents to be involved in the research even without parents' consent? Because in some cases, the parents may not want to consent for very specific reasons that are actually affecting the child's health. So is there some way we can deal with that? So that's basically the project at this stage. Questions, or
what are you looking for from the students?
Any input you may have, in particular on those three questions, but I think we've covered the first one. But especially maybe these two issues. I mean, any experiences or thoughts? Yeah.
You said it's a population cohort.
Yeah.
We're talking about mental health.
Yeah.
So how are you going to sell it?
We're looking at their mental health, but we're including all adolescents in the region. So it will be like they've done before. They have done it before in surveys, but it's not been as participants of a cohort, but they have filled in questionnaires about their mental health before. But the link between the individual responder and the data is cut. So we can't go back and we can't recruit them or ask them about, do a follow-up questionnaire. That's not possible. So we want to actually keep the link. So that's what we are asking for ethics approval for.
On the age question, I think you have the unfortunate problem that it's a legal question.
Yes, it is.
Which means that you either can or you can't in this circumstance. Now, of course, Norway is toying with the idea of going down to 12 years for valid research consent. Before that happens, I don't think that you can. I don't think there's any way to work around the parents at the moment.
Right. Are there experiences in other countries where, yeah?
Well, in Canada, this is provincial legislation, and in Nova Scotia, it's actually no age cut-off, but it depends on mental capacity.
Yeah.
So we have the interesting situation when, for essentially any teenagers, anyone between the age of 12 and 16, we need to repeatedly probe whether our participant has the capacity to make that decision for themselves. At which point we start replacing their parent consent with their own consent. Okay. So when we're going to see them, we often don't know in advance who will be consenting or whether we will need to repeat the consent.
So you're asking for consent every time you meet them, or?
Essentially, we started to do that, but definitely for this, we started to do it for everyone so that it's not confusing. But for this group, it's essentially mandatory, because if someone is coming, they are 14, and the last time it was their parent who consented, it's about 50-50 whether this time we will still be taking the parent consent as valid, or we will be asking them.
Is there any more input on this informed consent part before we go to the social media question? So for the social media, if I may start, the difficulty is, I think, quite similar to Forbo, that your control arm is the mutual care arm. Of course, it's actually no intervention.
Yeah.
I can imagine it being a problem if you go on social media. On the other hand, in your informed consent process, if you explain to the patients that they will be selected based on chance, and that it might happen that there are interventions where they are not even eligible, then patients who are not selected will not per se think, oh, there is an intervention and I have not been selected because based on chance, but they might just think there's an intervention that I wasn't eligible for and I wasn't selected. So that might also decrease this as an issue. But I think it's a difficult dilemma because on one hand, social media is so important for this group of people to reach them. So that's maybe one of the options to try to lower their expectations.
Yeah, we have the same question, or similar question, because the scleroderma community is very small, because it's a rare disease and people speak with each other at conferences, etc. They may share their information with each other, their login information, and there's just no way that we can control that. We were thinking about it and thought about whether it would be different in a Twix versus another RCT, where actually the exact same thing can happen and people can give each other's pills or swap pills, and we won't know. So I think one of the questions is this different from the Twix versus a regular RCT design? And I don't think it is necessarily.
There was another comment.
Presumably as well, your population of 30,000, the only ones that you would select to intervene is going to be a small number of that. If you're saying only 8% are diagnosed with something. So actually the proportion of people you're going to be pulling out to intervene with is going to be a very small proportion of your people. Yeah. So your contamination is not as high as if like half of your population are getting something. It's actually going to be a few people dotted around who actually get the intervention, so it's hopefully less of an issue because it's a small number.
Okay, so I think we have to end this.
Thank you very much.
Remark.